Melanotaenia Boesemani will be the second rainbow fish for me, at least chronologically. I've had them for almost 2 years now, and the reason it's taken so long to talk about is that early on, they caught me off guard and produced a massive spawn that I really wasn't ready for. I had them set up in a tank that I thought and intended to be inconducive to spawning, and even less so to fry survival. But it didn't turn out that way. I can't miss the chance here to say, life finds a way, because it did. And that's okay, because the only thing I love more than being right is finding out in spectacular fashion that I have no idea what I'm talking about. I've tried to recreate those implausible conditions, see if it works again, and this time take you along for the ride. I started with a single male and female in a 10-gallon tank. This is one of those species where distinguishing males from females is very easy. The males are colorful and larger, and the females are fairly drab and noticeably smaller. I will note that the females can show some impressive color at certain times, but having seen both sexes, you would never confuse the two. I've only seen intense color on 2 females that were getting aggressive and competitive with each other. There isn't much going on in this tank in terms of decor, and that was intentional. I was hoping that they wouldn't spawn. Right now I have some fine sand on the bottom, but originally it was crushed coral. I remember hearing that Melanotaenia prefer a higher pH, but almost 2 years later, I can't personally corroborate that. These particular fish have seemed quite happy everywhere above neutral and within a wide range of general hardness. The one parameter I found to have a notable influence on breeding was temperature. In the low 70s, for example, I found that they had very little interest in breeding. In the upper 70s, on the other hand, they spawn constantly. That's been my experience. I've found rainbows in general to be very easy to feed and take care of. They really aren't picky eaters. For my part, I typically fed them baby brine shrimp and some dry pellets. It's fun to watch them snipe food off the water's surface. The way they do this, I assume that they're largely insectivores. I don't think these are a fish that need to be stuffed with food to encourage spawns, but it never hurts. As far as I can tell, these fish have only one demand, if I can say that, in order to spawn, and that's a place to throw their eggs. Rainbow fish are conventionally known as mop spawners, and typically we would provide them a spawning mop simulating submerged vegetation. Just to give you a visual, here's an example from when I was breeding praecox rainbows. I found with that species at least that they have a clear preference for placing their eggs near the water surface. I expected to find the same preference in Boesemani. In this most recent instance, I gave them a clump of java moss that rested on the tank bottom, and this is where I'm deviating a bit from the prior spawn. At that time, there was a tiny piece of java moss stuck near the bottom of a sponge filter, and I don't have a picture of it, but just imagine a crumpled mass of java moss, more dead than alive, and about the size of a baby carrot. That's all they had to work with, and I was sure it wouldn't qualify as a suitable place to spawn. I was very, very wrong. So here's what that looks like. The male gets worked up and dances around near a spawning site, trying to get the female's attention and lead her into it. This is a fascinating thing to watch in person if you ever get the chance. I've always heard that rainbows turn on the color and spawn in the early mornings, that they're a first light spawner. Whenever I hear first light, I get a little bitchy about semantics. To me, a first light spawner would have to fit the definition that if given their first opportunity to spawn in the afternoon, they would refuse, and that just isn't true in my experience. If your lights come on at noon, but you separate a male and female with a divider until evening time, they'll spawn as soon as you remove the divider. That's exactly what I had to do in order to film this. The truer statement would be, I think, to say that they tend not to spawn in the dark. After some negotiation, the male and female line up side by side and shimmy around a bit, after which the female fires out a large number of eggs to rain down over the spawning site. My assumption is that the male uses this period to release milt ahead of the eggs. Here's an even better example, and just appreciate the volume of eggs released at one time. This can easily become a problem. If I can hazard some blasphemy, watching this made me wonder what the difference really is between a mop spawner and an egg scatterer. After some reflection, I would say adhesiveness of the eggs is probably a more defining characteristic than where exactly they choose to place their eggs. Again, like the first time, I left the parents in the tank. I was surprised to find that they didn't have much interest in eating eggs. I can't say they ate zero, but close. I didn't track hatching times closely, but as a loose estimate, I would say it took 10 to 14 days for the eggs to hatch. In the days just before, the developing fry were clearly visible within the eggs, occasionally moving as they prepared to hatch. As far as I can tell, the fry hatch and swim freely either immediately or after a period of immobility that is exceptionally short. Here I was surprised again to find that the adults didn't eat the fry. In fact, I saw them carefully avoiding it. What really shocked me was that the fry seemed relatively unfazed by the forceful, uplifting current of a sponge filter running at high pressure across the tank. For fry that spend most of their time just under the water surface, I would expect this to significantly limit fry survival. But it didn't, or at least not to the extent that I expected. Since the fry seemed to be tolerating it well enough, I used the column of air bubbles as a method for food delivery. I dusted some fry powder onto the surface of the water and let the rising air bubbles break surface tension for me. This would slowly send food particles falling through the water column where the fry could eat them. It worked out well and was so low effort that I think these might currently hold the title for easiest fry I've ever raised. After a week or two as the fry grew, I switched from fry powder to baby brine shrimp, and this was the bulk of their diet until they grew much larger. These that you see here are a little over a month old. Rainbows, by reputation, grow at an unusually slow pace. Very easy to breed, but it takes a while. This was recorded in March, and this was in June. These are just now starting to show color to the extent that they might be sexable, and personally, I would have no issue with transporting and selling at this size. They're about an inch, maybe a little longer, so if you want to compare their growth rate to other fish, it depends how you look at it. 4 to 5 months until a sellable size is not unusual to me, but 4 to 5 months to be an inch long, that is distinctly slow. If I look at them today, in July, I would say the growth curve is starting to accelerate. But take a look at that Java moss. Remember what it looked like in the beginning? Then look at it now. This is like the fish tank equivalent of growing a beard. It's fair to say this took a while. If you're wondering at what point the young fish become sexually mature, I am starting to find eggs in the moss again, so apparently pretty early. By the way, they are, at this point, perfectly happy to eat a variety of prepared foods. In conclusion, I wanted to say, congratulations, rainbow fish nerds, you got me. I concede. Rainbow fish, pound for pound, are probably the ideal fish for a display tank, assuming you have enough space to keep them comfortable. They're easy to feed, tough to kill, and if you're a sucker for color, just look at them. The only downside I can think of is that most people won't be interested in the females, and that makes them difficult to breed and sell. I would submit, though, that if you want to see the most intense coloration on any male fish, you want to have females to impress and other males to compete with. I would really advocate for keeping a mix. The only problem you'll have is controlling reproduction. Displays aren't really my focus at this point, but I think what I would do is pair this with some other species that would eat the fry, maybe a big tetra or something. And with that, I'll wrap this up. The next breeding video, I think, will most likely be Scleromystax barbatus, but I may have something else to squeeze in before that. We'll see. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.